Hey, Ideal Protein Nation, how are you doing? Good Lord, it's February already. Oh my gosh, this year is all 2022 is flying by. Man, also too, we've had some really great feedback after our last show featuring Jill and Claire Bailey. I hope that you had a chance to see that. We've certainly had a lot of new viewers and listeners sign on and subscribe, so we're super excited about that. I've got a great show for all of it of Ideal Protein Nation today, and I can't wait to bring that to you. But for those of you who don't know, the Life Possible podcast I created in 2020 during the pandemic, and I did it to help spotlight successful clients, coaches, and clinic owners who have used the Ideal Protein protocol to reset their body, reset their mind, and actually reset what's possible for their life. You know, now these people are pursuing goals and dreams that they never thought they could. They're pursuing goals and dreams they thought were dead and gone. And in some cases, they're pursuing goals and dreams they never even knew they wanted to. But in short, they're now living what we like to refer to as life possible. They're doing things that weren't possible before they restored their metabolic health and lost the weight, and now they feel great again. So who am I, and why did I even decide to do this? Well, you know, I tell you, there's no easy way to put this, but about 6.5 years ago, I was fat, sick, and depressed. My name is Dr. John Barnes, and I am the clinic director at Reset Wellness in Centerville, Virginia, outside of the Washington, D.C. area. And, you know, stress, anxiety, the pressures of practice, etc., had gotten to me just like it gets to everyone. And the problem was I gave up. I didn't see any way out of this until one day God answered all of my prayers, both personally and professionally, through one of my chiropractic patients who had gone to see his cardiologist and did a program called Ideal Protein. I looked into Ideal Protein, and the more that I learned about it, the more it made sense to me. I decided to do it myself. Here I am 6.5 years later. I'm over 65 pounds down from this original picture here. And darn it, anyhow, I'm living a life that I feel vibrant, healthy, and alive. Last year, I was actually able to complete my first half Ironman triathlon, which to me represents life possible. So who do I have today? Well, we are in for a treat. Today, I've got one of my favorite people in Ideal Protein, Dr. Dennis Barley. Dr. Barley right now is the Vice President of Healthcare Strategy for Ideal Protein. Like myself, Dr. Barley is a chiropractor. He's actually been in practice over 35 years. And he's been with Ideal Protein now for over 13 years. You know, as a clinician, he's fulfilled a clinic owner. He's also then many different roles within the company until now he is Vice President of Healthcare Strategy. I can't think of a better person for that position. Personally, he's got 3 sons. His oldest is a chiropractor as well, followed in Dad's footsteps. Dennis played semi-pro soccer, still plays competitively, and he's an adventurer. Check out that picture there. A few years ago, he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, which I just thought was super cool. And, you know, he does triathlons like myself. He's done Tough Mothers and Spartans. You know, without any further ado, let's bring in Dr. Dennis Barley. Hey, man.
Hey, John, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great, and thanks for having me on the show. I see your show. It's very exciting, and I'm excited to be here. So thanks so much.
Oh, thank you for taking the time. I think this show is going to be super valuable, as we've discussed, for everybody from the brand new Ideal Protein client to everybody in corporate. I just think that we've got a lot of great stuff to bring everybody. But you know what? Before we dive in, and while we've got this picture up, can you explain a little bit about this trip and climbing Mount Kilimanjaro?
Yeah, sure. A few years back, prior to my 60th birthday, believe it or not, I said,
no, just stop right there. There's no way you are 60 years old.
Hey, it's healthy living. It's good nutrition, good chiropractic care, and
Blew
everything
my
else.
mind. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So anyway, I got together. I was, of course, as these things go, I was sitting on my deck with a couple of friends, and one from Europe and one from here, and we were drinking a beer. And I said, "Hey, what do you guys think?" And we were all in. We had 4 from the UK and 4 from the US, and we all actually summited, which was great. Um, and because of Ideal Pro.
Summited. Can you kind of flesh out that term for me a little bit there? Summited. And
Sure. Yeah. Well, it took us 7 days. It's a trek. You're hiking. You're doing a little bouldering, but mostly just hiking up. And then the last trek, when you summit, is you start at about 11, 12 midnight the night before, and then you get up there at about sunrise. You do a lot of ascents, and then get used to the climate, to the atmosphere, and then descend and then go back up. So that's why it takes about 7 days, 6 to 7 days.
There's a lot more to a climb like this than people realize, right?
Yeah. And when I got to the top, you see the sign there. I actually, it's kind of comical. I don't want anybody to see it anymore, but I posted this on Facebook where I was making a pronouncement about ideal protein and its value to the world. But unfortunately, when you're up there for a bit, you get oxygen deprived. So it didn't come out like I wanted it to. So it's just one of those things. But I had a great time. It was a great achievement. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely amazing and very inspirational. You are going to have to show me that video at some point.
Yeah, it's kind of comical.
So Dennis, again, chiropractor for 35 years, just like myself. And, when Dolores Zimbato brought me Ideal Protein, was talking to me about it originally, she said, the 2 most common places that you're going to find the Ideal Protein program are chiropractic office and cardiology practices, right?
Yeah.
And, I think some people are surprised to find it in a chiropractic office. Can you kind of take us through the journey it took to bring Ideal Protein to you and to incorporate it into your office?
Absolutely. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm going to call timeout real quick. Can you turn down your volume on your side a little bit?
Sure.
We're getting a little feedback.
Is that better?
There we
better
go.
There?
Perfect.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah. I met Dolores 13 years ago, actually. So we kind of started the same time. She started a little earlier than I did, but when a patient came to me and they had weight issues, and I could see that, the rampant inflammation, being a chiropractor and working with joints, I could see the inflammation. I could see the damage on the joints. That extra weight was harming those patients. I really didn't know what to tell them to do. Again, like most healthcare providers, there's not a lot of time in an appointment. I could have set another separate time, and I did a couple of times. I started doing other diet plans for them, and it was very, very cumbersome until I was actually pulling out of practice, and a doctor friend of mine in New Jersey, Susan Kunico, used to be with Ideal Protein. She said, "Hey, take a look at this." I wanted to coach soccer at the college level. So I was at a Ray Reed, who used to coach UConn, and Tony DeChico, who used to coach the women's national team. I was at a training to become, and I'm like, "No, thanks. No, I'm not going to do that." And she said, "Read the science." And that weekend I read the science on Ideal Protein, and I was taken. I was like, this will work. And so I brought it into the practice, gave it to my staff. I tried it. I do everything myself also. So I did it. I dropped 13 pounds, 8 pounds in the first week, because I have a lot of glycogen. And then 13 pounds total. But that wasn't the big aha moment. The big aha was I dropped 70 points of total cholesterol and 2 inches on my waist. And that hasn't changed in 13 years.
Yeah.
So I knew it was onto something. Dr. Tran, who developed this, it was a phenomenal scientific protocol that I could give to my patients. We actually then brought it into practice. And about a year and a half later, we were seeing over 550 patients just in the weight loss practice alone. So we were very, very,
Wow.
very busy. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then Ideal Protein asked me to come on as a consultant, and I've been many different levels throughout the company, and here I
Yeah.
sit. So,
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean,
but
and
the John, the changes I saw,
hmm
you talked about cardiologists. Why a chiropractor brought it in, will bring this in, is because we are heavily trained in nutrition. And having that, I have an extra, specialty in sports, chiropractic sports physician. So
yep.
there's more nutrition there. I just knew that this would work. So and here's the thing that I say about this: chiropractors diagnose a problem, then they rehabilitate the problem, and then they tell that patient that periodically they should be seen for the rest of their life. And I know
Yeah.
that might be cringeworthy, but if you know about health, you will do that. The same as you go to a dentist or a physician, the same thing for a lifetime, if you want a quality and you want longer quantity of life.
Yeah.
And so, who best to talk about nutrition than a chiropractor? On the cardiology side, the amazing changes I saw in type 2 insulin dependent patients coming off of their insulin, and cardiovascular patients having great changes in their triglycerides and their total cholesterol. It was just a no-brainer for a cardiologist to bring it in too. So, we actually had a relationship in our area with cardiologists who didn't have it, but we had a symbiotic relationship where their patients would come to us and we'd refer to them for for retitration of medications, et cetera. So
Yeah.
um, it's a phenomenal protocol.
Yeah, as Dolores explained it to me, it was, cardiologists actually do enjoy taking their patients off of medications and removing medications from there.
Yeah,
They hate giving them that one next medication as things progress, and so
yeah,
that's why it's a very commonplace to either find it in their office or find that they refer to an ideal protein clinic in their area.
right.
Chiropractors. This quote. I love this quote from Thomas Edison that I saw in chiropractic school. This was certainly fed to us by many of my professors. I'm sure you saw it as well. The doctor of the future will give no medication, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, which seems to describe the practice of chiropractic, and in diet and in the cause and prevention of disease. And I just kind of feel like you and I have had this conversation, but I feel like a chiropractic office that includes the ideal protein protocol is fulfilling that very definition of Thomas Edison's doctor of the future.
Absolutely. And, with the obesity epidemic that we're seeing in North America today, more and more people are walking into our offices that have comorbidities associated with obesity. And they don't want to be on medications, not
No.
necessarily. And, they want something that can help them. And so as a primary intervention, somebody before they come in sick, this is a great protocol, but also as a secondary intervention for those patients that do come in with unhealthy weight and the comorbidities associated with it, it's a great protocol to make a change in their metabolic profile.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are going to talk about that in depth today. Again, we've got stuff for everybody. But one of the things I also did want to point out about our discussions on how you got into ideal protein was you felt this was more of you didn't choose to do this. Can you fill out? Can you
Sure.
finish that statement for me?
Yeah, well, I was happy just practicing chiropractic and then moving into coaching soccer, and it came along, and I applied it, and I just saw the great changes in health for my patients. One of my patients commented and said, "This is probably the best thing you've ever done.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you for bringing it in."
Right.
And I just, I really, I just think that it was a calling for me. I mean, and I've gotten so much deeper into it, and I'm this epidemic that we have is so huge, it permeates everything. I mean, if you look at obesity, it's essentially the foundation for all other disease. And I don't say that, other physicians are saying that.
Hmm.
Physicians like Mark Hyman and, Robert Lustig, et
Lustig,
cetera.
yeah,
It's the
yeah.
foundation for all the rest.
Hmm.
And so addressing that, I think, has been for me paramount. And getting obesity awareness out there has been really paramount for me too. And this is one of the quotes that I use when I vlog on LinkedIn. But the way I say it is, be the change you want to see in the world. If you want to change this world, you've got to be the change. You've got to not sit on the sidelines, but
Yeah.
get on the field and start standing up. Even if you look foolish like my vlogs, I don't care because I am.
And you don't look foolish. And that, again, that is, I love those. You started doing those, especially on LinkedIn. And that's what led me to think, oh my God, you know what? I need to have Dennis on the show. We need to give him a bigger platform and encourage him to continue with those vlogs. And I love the fact that that is kind of the quote, that is the drive and the motto behind that, because we do. We've got a mission and a vision that we are going to enroll, hopefully, all of Ideal Protein Nation in by the end of the show. I think first we need to show, and I think we need to discuss really the magnitude of weight issues and obesity in America, and actually, for that matter, around the world, because unfortunately, a lot of other countries decided to adopt what we did and follow what we all thought were kind of trends in healthy nutrition.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, there is this healthcare tsunami going on.
Yeah.
It is obesity is labeled as a disease, but oftentimes it's not looked at as like a disease. So the symptoms of that disease, right? The cardiovascular disease, the diabetes, those are being treated or diagnosed and treated. But obesity itself, the numbers aren't that great about us healthcare providers talking to our patients about unhealthy weight. And unfortunately, 73% of us are overweight or obese in this country. And uh,
Wow.
in 20,
73%.
yeah, and 20,
Wow.
and in 8 years from now, 2030, they say that 50% will be in the obesity category. And you probably recognize this too, John. I mean, when I started 13 years ago, the average person walking through the door had to lose about 15 to 20 pounds. Today, it's easily 50 to 60. So
Yeah.
just in 13 years, it
Yep.
is skyrocketed. And
Yeah.
then,
The
hey,
trend in obesity has been crazy. If you pull up that graph online,
yeah,
since the 1970s through today, the slope is just the craziest thing I've ever seen. And this is with continued advice on nutrition that we've been given.
right. Well, that's the scary point is that, the dietary guidelines for Americans comes out every 5 years. And from 2020 to 2025, that dietary guideline speaks only to the 30% that don't have a weight issue. How are we going to correct
Right.
the financial burden, the life killing burden of this disease of obesity if we don't address the 70% that need it most? So our
Yeah.
dietary, USDA and Health and Human Services has got to do a better job of researching what's real, what's going to help the majority of our population with it as far as dietary intervention goes, and what types of foods we should be eating, because they tout this low calorie, low fat diet, which unfortunately, when you lower one macronutrient like that, you're going to bump up another, which is carbohydrates, and quite frankly, carbohydrates are the problem.
Yeah.
So we're not doing
Absolutely.
ourselves any favors, right?
No, we're not.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great place to bring up this other concept of metabolic health. You talk about 73% of Americans are overweight. When we're talking about being metabolically healthy,
Mm.
it's an even worse number,
Right,
right?
right. So, metabolically healthy, we'll probably touch on this later in the podcast, but you know, metabolic syndrome. There's a doctor emeritus out of Stanford University, Dr. Gerald Reaven. He said that metabolic syndrome was, if you had one of these things, you had metabolic syndrome: high blood pressure, high blood sugar, central obesity, which is the worst type. Visceral obesity is the worst type, where it's highly
Yep.
inflammatory.
Yep.
And if you had those issues, that was called metabolic syndrome. So that means that 87.8% of the population has metabolic syndrome.
Yeah.
Their metabolism isn't at optimal function. And at the center point of that, Reaven also said there was a correlation between high insulin levels in the blood, hyperinsulinemia, and something called insulin resistance, where our cells pushed back and didn't readily accept insulin. And as you well know, insulin is that master hormone that the pancreas produces that takes energy from our food and utilizes it. It takes it to the cells for utilization and then shunts it over to the fat cell for storage for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Great innate mechanism, but unfortunately, with the sedentary lifestyle that we have, it's just gone. And the types of foods we eat, the
Right.
central aisles of the grocery store with the hyper palatable, processed, sugar, fat, salty foods, we are gaining and gaining and gaining more weight. So that metabolic health is really at a detriment. And again, it's costing us and it's killing us, as you well know.
And so now I think people are actually starting to understand this, and we had something happen that made it even more important to
Yes.
understand, right?
Yeah.
When the pandemic hit, uh, boy, this shed a spotlight, and practitioners like you and I, we saw this from the very beginning. We could see it in our medical literature feeds. Our social media feed is different from others, and so we were getting these messages like, "Oh my gosh, the comorbidities are the things that are creating the biggest issue for people handling COVID-19."
Mm-hmm.
And but somehow that wasn't really getting translated to the population at large.
Right.
Can you speak to that?
Well, now I do believe, because more and more you're seeing research being done and they're naming obesity, and of
Yep.
course with obesity comes those comorbidities. But they're naming obesity as one of the major factors, not just in the adult population, but also in the youth, our teens, et cetera, that their worst outcomes with COVID-19 were
Yeah.
those that had obesity, ventilations, hospitalizations, and death. So we know that it is definitely a major contributor. And I think, if there's any lemonade from that lemon of COVID-19, it would be that any silver lining here, it would be that it alerted the healthcare population even more so that it is something that we have got to address.
Yeah.
It's vitally important that nutrition be a central part of healthcare. Yet it isn't. I mean, if we look at allopathy and the way, and even talk about CMS and Medicare and how they pay for care, they're paying for medications and surgeries, and many times dietary interventions are pushed over here because of the yo-yoing diets that are out there. So, weight loss is the healthcare that you deserve. And you bet, John. I mean, it is now coming more and more into the forefront. And I really hope that more and more healthcare providers look to a dietary intervention such as Ideal Protein to help their patients, because
Yeah.
you can see some great health results just utilizing our protocol.
Well, and that's the thing. I really hope that we are in a window, in an opportunity, because of that spotlight that COVID-19 has shown, where more healthcare practitioners will be open to including the Ideal Protein program in their office, or establishing collaborative wellness opportunities with
Yes.
their local Ideal Protein clinics.
Yeah.
And referring their clients there, creating a team effort for the benefits of their patients. They're the ones that stand to
Yeah.
win through all this thing. But I also think that part of this is, and we've all been caught up in it, but I love how you address, and you do this on your vlog and you do this through your posts. I love how you address the concept that, weight gain, a weight issue, or obesity, it's actually not a willpower or character flaw issue.
Mm.
And I think
Yeah.
I think that, unfortunately, this has so many people spun up and stirred up, and it's created such a conflict over the concept of weight loss and
Right.
dieting, and I
Right.
think it's essential that we we show the position that we are in, where we understand that, in fact, this is not, in most cases, a willpower or a character flaw issue. There should be no shame or guilt attached to this problem. Can you
Absolutely.
speak? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. If we're thinking that, it is a character flaw and that we've got to exercise more and eat less, we are definitely barking up the wrong tree. It is absolutely, the research is out there now that this is a physiological issue within your body. It's an innate mechanism. It was a survival mechanism back in the caveman days, where we had to eat and fast, eat and fast. And so what's happening is our hormones run amok with the types of foods that we eat. So if we're overburdening our body with carbohydrates, right, which turn into sugar, then that stimulates the hormone insulin, and we climb up, we start gaining weight, and that's where these ill health comorbidities come about. And so our body was designed to gain weight. So recognize that it's not your fault. And the fact of the matter is nobody teaches nutrition education anymore. I said
Mm.
this on a podcast I was on a couple of weeks ago. I was like, we need to bring back home ec. And I kind of, I kind of really mean that. Is
Oh, absolutely.
we have to bring that back into school so that our kids know what to eat, because this problem goes actually prior to conception. 18 months prior, when a mother is the foods that she eats is definitely going to affect the fetus and the
Yep.
child later.
Yep.
So, this is something that we've got to go back to grassroots. It takes a village. I know that sounds, very, punny or whatever, but
No.
the fact of the matter is we've got to do a better job of educating people about the types of food that they eat.
and
So,
and how to cook it. Again, you
yeah,
you harken back to the concept of a home ec class,
yeah,
and again, it's a situation of, I constantly come across grown-ups who don't even know how to cook, and, oh, doc, what that would require me, how do you cook vegetables? I don't understand. I never.
It,
It's,
it,
it's
it,
so much work, doc.
is
I just.
ketchup a vegetable?
Well, no, but pizza is, evidently. That's what I've heard in school lunches, because it's got
Yeah,
tomato sauce on it.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
a whole different conversation. But you're
yeah.
right, and it is just astounding what we're seeing with young people, and I saw that study that came out most recently about comorbidities, the same comorbidities in the teens with COVID. So yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, Doc.
Yeah.
Um, the other problem is too, though, like, the deck is stacked against us.
Hmm.
Just turn on your TV, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've been watching a lot of football lately,
Yeah.
right? And the commercials just kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the standard American diet is pretty horrendous. Um, and again, it's laden with high calorie, high carbohydrate, fat, salt, processed foods. That is just a recipe for disaster. Matter of fact, if we bring this back a step to COVID and those kids, do you know the prevalence of obesity in the 22 months during COVID, last 22 months in COVID, equaled about a decade of prevalence of obesity in the teen and below population. That's significant.
Yeah.
Couple that diet there, the standard American diet, the SAD diet, with a sedentary lifestyle of gaming, of being on Zooms all day. Um, you know, Again, it's a health disaster. It's a health tsunami, right? It's coming down the
Yeah.
pike.
Yeah, absolutely. So how are we going to fix this? I mean, it seems
Yeah,
like, we're trying to go about this in a different way.
right.
This is what we want to flesh out next.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
The standard American diet, as you referenced, being so carbohydrate heavy and sugar oriented. And I think if we go through these next slides that you've prepared, people will come to understand what we mean by the magnitude of change that has happened in the American diet. Can you walk us through these slides?
sure. In 1912, if you click again, you'll see that the average American over a year's time ate about 5 pounds of sugar in a year through their diet. But 100 years later, in 2012, and now we're 10 years beyond that, that number was 200. Anywhere,
200 pounds of sugar.
yeah, it's anywhere from 150 to 200 pounds of sugar. And where are they getting that sugar from? Where are we getting that sugar from? Well, just take a look at the sodas that are being drunk, the vending machines in schools
Yep.
have sugar water in there. They've got high sugar Gatorades, juices.
Yep.
Without the fruit itself, drinking a juice is just as harmful. Condiments, I mentioned ketchup before, tons of
Yep.
sugar in that. High fructose corn syrup, probably the worst thing you could be consuming. So because that's a double whammy, it affects the liver and and all of that. So I just think things have got to change. I do see some change happening. Um, you know, there are big companies, big food is starting to do some of the right things, not all the way, but they are goaling like for 2030 and 2030, 40 and 50 to make changes. I know it's a little change, but you might see a smaller can of Coke as opposed to
Yeah.
a regular can of Coke, a small Reese's. I think you and I talked about that the other day, as opposed to a large Reese's. Again, not good, but it's a step in the right direction. There are some grocers that are actually labeling their foods red, green, or yellow,
Huh.
meaning this is a high glycemic index or a high sugar
Wow.
food. So,
Hmm.
so be careful. I do like that. I do think, and again, I said this before, it takes a village. I do think it's going to take everybody. It's going to take
Yeah.
schools. It's going to take, the DGA, Dietary Guidelines for Americans. So the
Yeah.
USDA, the HSA, the CMS is going to have to start accepting dietary intervention as a paid service for healthcare
A
providers.
paid treatment. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and big food's got to jump in, and the AMA and everybody, AHA, everyone's got to start jumping in and pitching in to get to the bottom of this, because this is not going away anytime soon, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
I
I
don't
do
mean to be
believe.
all gloom and doom, but
No, no, no.
it
But I
is the way
do.
it's trending.
We talked about the Reese's peanut butter cup, and their campaign is "Sorry, not sorry."
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
find them everywhere in every shape or form. I did
yeah.
take exception to where it said maybe even in chiropractors' offices, and I was like, yeah, that's the one place you will never find Reese's peanut butter
Yeah,
cups.
yeah,
And the most recent thing that just absolutely illustrates it the best in watching the recent football games, Skinny Pop. The popcorn that is evidently lower calorie for you, etc. Well, yeah, they've cut the calories for you. They've put the word skinny on the bag, but now what they're saying is they've got an entire jingle, a whole new song that says it's a whole bag kind of night. right?
Yeah.
Which is literally just promoting the behavior that gets us all, because I was certainly guilty of it myself, in trouble.
Right.
When we use food like that to comfort ourselves, to when we're feeling bad, sad, gloom and doom, we it's a whole bag kind of night. Boy, I had a crappy week, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the mindless eating, many times people are just mindlessly eating in front of the television or, doing work on a Zoom, eating lunch, grabbing something on the go. Those are all of the problems that, need to be addressed, Um,
So, so again, I get people who, okay, but doc, I cut the sugar. I've cut my sugar way down. Oh, I don't even have a sweet tooth, doc. I don't understand this. And I guess where there is still a disconnect for a lot of people coming into our programs, and where I see people's eyes pop the widest open during my workshop, is when we understand that it's not just carbohydrates that are already sugar. It's all usable carbohydrates that we eat get processed into sugar and then released in our bloodstream before our body's going to do something about that. And in
right.
fact, it doesn't take a whole lot. Can you take us through this concept?
Well, sure. I mean, again, going back to those bags of sugar you saw before, a slice of bread equals 20 grams of carbs. And typically you divide the number of carbs by 4, and that'll equal the equivalent of teaspoons of sugar that you're eating. So one slice of bread has 5 teaspoons of sugar. So if you're having a sandwich, you wouldn't go to the sugar bowl and say, hey, give me 10, right?
Right.
So, uh,
That's what people don't get. It
yeah,
only takes 4 net
yeah,
grams of carbs to get processed and dumped into your bloodstream as 1 teaspoon of sugar.
right.
And you know what? We'll get even a little bit deeper with this. I know that there are people who are testing their blood sugar all the time, right?
Yeah.
Whether they've got type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes, whatever. But you need to understand that when you prick your finger and it measures 100 mgdl, when you see it's 100 or below, right? We're excited about that because that's normal.
Mhm.
But if it's 100 mgdl, that means that there's literally 1 teaspoon of sugar in the entire 5 liters of blood in your bloodstream.
Hmm.
So to put that into perspective, right? Let's eat that slice of bread.
Right.
You just 5 times the amount of sugar that's supposed to be in your bloodstream you just released there. Now, does that make you think your body has to scramble in order to bring that blood sugar back down to normal?
Oh yeah, it's causing a whole cascade of hormones in the body. I mean, and every hormone relates to the other. So, you're driving insulin up. You're causing some leptin resistance when your insulin's high. So you're not getting the cues that you're full from leptin, right? Leptin's a hormone the fat cell produces. Um, with eating I always say eat a carbohydrate, it begets another carbohydrate. So that, once you eat that carbohydrate, it stimulates ghrelin. And so we've got, this shortened cycle of feeding, wanting more carbohydrates. Think about this. If you have a bowl of Cocoa Puffs in the morning, which we don't suggest, let's say you have a bowl of Cocoa Puffs at 8 in the morning, you're looking for something at 10:30, 11 o'clock. You're hungry.
Absolutely.
But if you have something more substantial, more fiber, more more
Protein.
protein based, right? So you have an egg and with some berries, let's just say. If you're eating that in the morning, you probably won't be hungry until at 8 o'clock. You probably won't be hungry until 12. So
Right.
there is a difference what you're putting in. So again, mindless eating and just reaching for that bagel is not the way to go. And what happens is, as insulin goes up, there's an overproduction of insulin. It lowers the sensitivity of all of our cells and the action of insulin, and that causes weight gain, which again causes this metabolic syndrome and all of the comorbidities. And I use that term loosely, but the diabetes and the cardiovascular issues, etc. But here's the scary thing, John. So many people are walking around today that are pre-diabetic and have no knowledge.
I have no idea.
I know this factoid here that there are 100 million in the US alone that have what we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now that's a consequence of non-alcoholic, meaning that your liver is utilizing sugar, is fattening the liver, and then it progresses into something called NASH, right? Non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, and then it moves into cirrhosis. So that means that the tissue of the liver is getting worse over time. 100 million people have the beginning stage of it, and it does progress over time, but only 4% know that they have it.
Yeah.
That's
I've seen those.
that's the
This is,
insidious nature of what our diet can do to our metabolic health.
yep.
And that's what we have to pay attention to if we want quality and quantity of life.
Yeah, non-alcoholic fatty liver or NASH, and AFLD is the latest epidemic that has come
Mm-hmm.
along in the string of metabolic epidemics
Mm-hmm.
that is getting a whole lot of press these days. And when they're finding it in kids too, again, we can
Yeah,
apply this to kids, and that's
yeah.
the thing that really blows your mind.
And
So
I know we'll get to this, but there was a study utilizing idoprotein with NASH, and we'll get to that. But there's some really great changes, not only enzymatically, liver enzymes, but also fibrosis, meaning the tissue changes. So, again, dietary intervention many times is looked on as, we're not going to do that because people yo-yo on and off. But when you have a program like ours, where we're phenomenal at weight loss, but we've developed by a dietitian intervening and coming in and developing the last two phases of our protocol, where there's stabilization and maintaining that weight loss, that's the holy grail. That's where we can actually get that 12.2% metabolically suboptimal the 87.8% suboptimal into that optimal category. So,
yeah, you know,
that's
yeah. I love this quote by Albert Einstein, and again, to me, I use this during my introductory workshop because I think it really begets where idoprotein comes from. And the idea is that we cannot solve our problems at the same level of thinking that was used when we created them. And diet mentality. Eat less, exercise more. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We've got to look at this differently. And
yeah.
you've already laid it out so well on the show. We have to look at this metabolically instead of just calories in versus calories out. We've got to look at the underlying hormonal responses to food instead of just thinking, oh, I ate this much, I've got to burn this much, and if I don't, I'm going to gain the weight
Mm-hmm.
or lose the weight. It just doesn't work like that. The human body is amazingly complex and exquisitely simplistic once you start to understand things. And let's really talk about what makes the Ideal Protein Protocol different thinking. And how is it that we do achieve? We'll talk about the crazy results that we can achieve with the research that's been published using the protocol. But let's start here. This is a slide that you gave me
Mm-hmm.
to use. Can you take us through this?
Sure. I mean, our protocol was developed by Dr. Tran, a physician, and then later, last few years, by a dietitian, Deirdre Pizzaferato. It was designed to restore metabolic health by supporting the remission of insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia. Now, again, if you recall, hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance are essentially the bullseye of metabolic syndrome, meaning the
Yeah.
symptoms that you get from this disease of obesity. This metabolic syndrome, the center bullseye is insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia. And then that little red zone, the very center of that bullseye, are carbohydrates and the intolerance
Yeah.
to carbohydrates.
Yep.
So
The
we can get
chronic overconsumption of carbohydrates right in the
you
center of that
you
bullseye.
you bet. And what I love about this protocol and why Dr. Kuniko said, check this out, is because it gave me predictable, repeatable, and measurable results every time.
It's crazy.
And we not only utilize, an intervention that's great at weight loss, but we're now utilizing behavioral change, We utilize exercise, and we're trying to make that person as well-rounded as we can, so that they can go on and, like yourself, do triathlons, get on the floor with their grandkids, climb upstairs without huffing and puffing,
Yep.
not being embarrassed needing a seatbelt extender on an airplane. And so, we're now a 3-phase protocol. We started off as a 4, but as we've learned more and research has changed, we became a 3-phase protocol where we lose weight, we then stabilize that weight, which is so crucially important, and then move into maintaining that weight.
Which again, you and I talked about that, right? That's kind of the chiropractic model of chiropractic care.
Didn't want to go there again, but yeah, exactly. It's totally chiropractic care, and it's why this is so great for chiropractors. But again, our allopathic brethren, they are actually seeing more and more patients not wanting the medications, wanting to do things more, be more proactive, do things that enhance their health long term. And you're seeing, Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Hyman and all of these physicians now on social media talking about how to eat, how we should eat to gain full balanced health.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go through. There we go. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about this. Again, the Ideal Protein Program being a 3-phase system, and one of those phases that we use first out of the gate is a ketogenic phase, right? For weight loss. Why can't I just go online and watch some videos and do my own keto?
Well, that's a great point, and I say this is probably the most powerful slide any healthcare provider and any patient could see that describes the ideal protein difference. And again, I want to just step back a phase and just say we are a restricted. Here's us. We're a adequate protein diet, so we're not hyperprotein.
Yep.
We are a healthy, low-fat diet, so we're not really true ketogenic. Then we are also a reduced or restricted carbohydrate and adequate and absolutely the recommended daily allowance for all of the micronutrients that we need, the vitamins and minerals. Now, we do have an alternative program that our type 1 dieters can utilize, which is more, it includes more complex carbohydrates. So it's definitely not ketogenic. So I wanted to just put that out there so that when some physicians and dietitians hear the word ketogenic, they immediately turn away. This is not what ideal protein is. I'm going to explain the difference. On the left, on my left, where you see a regular balanced diet. In that balanced diet, it's about a 2,000 calorie a day diet. Let's just say it's anywhere from 2,000 to 2,800. Those macronutrients are proteins, fats, and carbs in a certain ratio. And then the micronutrition is also in those foods.
And when you say that, you mean vitamins and minerals. When you say micronutrition.
Thank you for saying, So those vitamins and minerals are adequate for the body to sustain itself and do what it needs to do. The good news is there's no weight gain, but there's no weight loss in that healthy, balanced diet. Now, most of us are not there. So we would never survive on that diet because we're eating anywhere from 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories a day sometimes. If we do a commercial diet where someone loses weight but then regains it, this is like the hypocaloric diet. Now, I'll give you a hypocaloric diet. John, I'm going to put you on 500 calories a day of ice cream. That's all you can have.
Hey, I'm in.
That's all you can have. You'll be happy because it tastes good, but you won't be happy because your health will suffer. And the type of weight you lose on that hypocaloric diet is expressed in that bar graph. So in other words, if I'm reducing everything, I'm not giving that patient enough protein. So they're not feeding the muscle, which is actually the engine that burns the calories in the first place. So if I put them on that diet and I take them off of that diet and they don't have enough muscle, what's going to happen? They're going to regain once they go back to eating the way they were before.
Because in fact, we just we just reduce their metabolism, right?
Right, right,
We reduce that base metabolic
right.
need that they have and made it even easier for them to overeat.
Yes, and so they are, so that's the yo-yo dieting we're talking about. And then again, there's the second problem is there's not enough, there's too many carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And the body first goes to that energy tank of carbohydrates first to burn that for energy. So the weight loss won't be as effective. And then there's not enough, again, vitamins and minerals. If we go next to the DIY keto, DIY stands for do it yourself.
Yep.
Many of those diets are about 70% fat. Because of that, are we diminishing the amount of protein that the body needs to feed that engine that burns the calories? That's a question mark. But the type of fat that we eat, how healthy is that? Are we eating saturated fat? Some people who do a DIY keto, like if I go home and do it and you go home and DIY keto, there's no standardization. You're doing something different. I'm doing something different.
Right.
But
right.
my DIY keto is a double cheeseburger with bacon on top, and I throw out the bun. How healthy do you think that really is? Mm-hmm. So they will lose weight because they've restricted the carbs, but they've bounced up that saturated fat potentially, and it's not necessarily healthy. And again, they're not getting the micronutrition or the vitamins and minerals. Dr. Tran said, let's give a patient the amount of protein that they need. So you are a unique person coming into an office. I come into your office. I'm unique to this diet. You tell me how many proteins that I can have. And we use whole food right out of the gate. So dietitians like this. And we use partial meal replacement for structure and to get adequate protein and to reduce our calories and fat in those proteins. So we're not using as many whole proteins, but we do have one meal a day in our first weight loss phase that is a whole protein. But we're utilizing ideal protein partial meal replacements, whole foods. We reduce the fat and we give good fat, fish oil, right? Omega-3s, olive oil. And then we reduce the carbs and we get plenty of vitamins and minerals so that we're meeting the RDA's recommended daily allowance for the macronutrients and the micronutrients when they're on the weight loss phase. Yeah. This is a healthy, efficient way to lose weight. Yeah. And we'll see a slide that shows, what happens when people do other diets and what happens when they do our diet.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, the difference in the do-it-yourself and ideal protein, I like to explain to people, everybody, their brother and their sister loses weight the first week and they think it's amazing, right? Yeah. But then after that is where you're going to see that do-it-yourself eating 70% fat, again, yes, now your body is burning fat as its primary fuel, but it's going to have to burn the fat that comes in first before it's ever going to dig into storage and lose weight. Right. And so that's the difference, when we're doing the protocol. That's why we keep the fat low in the protocol, because we want the energy coming from fat that fuels your daily life to come out of storage.
And you bring up a great point. When we get to that point where we're burning on fat, our own fat for energy, which is basically in about day 4 or 5 or 6. Yeah. When we start doing that, even though that diet on the right-hand side, ideal protein, says that our food intake is 1,000 calories. But when we burn, those 2.5 pounds a week, we're getting an extra 1,000 calories from that.
Straight out of fat storage, baby.
Yeah. So,
right.
Yeah. So we're getting the adequate amount of calories too. When you look at it, it's a pretty fascinating diet where the science really, utilizes all the physiology in the body to get where we want to get.
Well, and I think too, this is a challenge for a lot of men who come into the program. I recently had an experience with a guy who's an ex-college football player. He's law enforcement right now. And his wife has been doing the program with me, and she's been super successful with it. And she finally convinced him that he should give it a shot. But he's sitting there going, oh, my God, how am I going to make it through on the food that my wife is eating? Right. Yeah. We not only do we measure his overall weight, but we look at the breakdown. We look at his muscle mass. We look at his fat mass. And the first visit we had together, when I said, oh, dear Lord, you've got 108 pounds of muscle on your body. We got to support this, right? So we are going to give you additional protein to support that muscle mass because it's so super important. right?
You
And,
bet.
and that's how we individualize our standardized protocol, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it's a big deal for us, like I said, especially a lot of men who are considering doing this.
Right.
But now I love this concept that you're going to bring to light here, that weight loss isn't just weight loss.
Right.
We want it to be the right kind of weight, and we want it to be what I like to refer to as meaningful weight. Can you take us
Right.
through these slides?
Yeah. So, like I said before, you can lose weight on the ice cream diet of 500
Yep.
calories of ice cream a day, but it's the type of foods that you put in to your body that are going to sustain it long term and provide good health outcomes. So, when we do a typical diet, some of those yo-yo diets, you know, it's acceptable to lose if you lose, let's say I'm going to use 100 pounds, you've lost 100 pounds and you've done a yo-yo diet, it's acceptable that 25 pounds of that 100 was was lean mass,
Yeah.
was your
It's good
muscle,
weight. Yeah, it
which
was
is good
muscle
weight,
mass.
which is what you want to hold on to, because when you're done dieting, you need that to burn the calories. And people losing that amount, it's no wonder they're yo-yoing. So our chief medical officer, Dr. Frank Douglas, as you know well, John,
Yeah, Dr.
yeah,
D.
yeah. He did this statistical analysis of a bunch of patients, and the next slide shows, I think it's females,
This is
100.
crazy.
Yeah,
I did not know about this, and I love the
amazing.
fact you've brought this to me.
Yeah, he brought this data to light where it took 165 female patients who were on the protocol for 16 weeks. Yes, they lost 24% of fat loss in 16 weeks, which was great, but they only lost 5% lean mass loss in 16 weeks. So go back to the ice cream diet or the hypocaloric diet person who lost the 100 pounds, they lost 25 of lean mass. This ideal protein patient woman lost 5 pounds. If
Yeah.
we go to the men, they only lost 2 pounds.
It's
So,
crazy.
so it's very significant how you diet, and that's why dieting, has got a bad name, because there's a lot of fly by nights. And I
Yep.
always suggest that you're overseen by a healthcare provider, and there's
Yep.
some evidence, there's some research backing the diet that you're doing, not only in the generalized scheme of things, but that diet also has its own research,
Yep.
outside research done and
Yep.
maybe published. So it's vitally important how we lose weight, no question.
Yeah. And I think the thing that gets lost, and every time I hear another ideal protein person say it, the thing that gets lost is that when Dr. Tran originally started this work, he
Mm.
started it because he was working with the Olympic athletes,
Yes.
on the French Olympic team. And
Mhm.
these Olympic athletes came to him, which I think this graph just shows. They came to him because they wanted to shave off just that extra bit of fat to give them the edge. We've got the Olympics coming up in a couple of
Yeah.
days, right?
Yeah.
Just that extra bit of fat to give them the competitive advantage, but not lose their precious muscle that
Right.
they've been working on so hard. And I think people lose sight of the fact that that's how this whole thing got started.
Yep. You bet. Yeah, really, really, really great. So yeah, we have those three phases. It's the weight loss phase, which optimizes fat loss and preserves lean mass. The phase 2 and 3, which are new to many who have done this 10 years ago or so. You acquire something called a macro code. That's proprietary to Ideal Protein, and it's unique to the individual. So, do you know your macro code, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your macro code?
Yeah, so I need 6.5 to 7 servings of protein.
Okay.
I'm allowed to fill in. I like to say we prioritize protein first, so that's why I
Yeah.
always lead with that.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to fill in with anywhere from 5 to 7 servings of fat every
Okay.
single day. And I've actually found that my personal carbohydrate tolerance is super low. Boy, when I
Yeah.
blew out my metabolism, I did it right.
Yeah.
And so I pretty much maintain under 30 to 40 extra net grams of
Okay.
carbs a
All right.
day
Yeah.
uh, on a regular basis, and that's if I'm including carbs, because my my sensitivity to carbohydrates is gastrointestinal.
Mhm.
It's inflammatory. It's energy, and I can tell I'm very sensitive now to how food affects me after this
Right.
program, which
Yeah,
is a blessing.
absolutely. It keys you in. So I just wanted to point out what your code was so that tell you that mine's different. So we have the same protein value of 6.5
Hmm.
servings. My fats are a little higher at 6 to 8. And when I at normal I can do 55
Yeah.
grams of carbohydrate. But when I'm playing soccer religiously or training for a triathlon, I'm up at
Yep.
65. So yeah, there is that. That's what I was just trying to point out is the uniqueness to that macro code. And then we learn to navigate the food environment in phase 3 using your coach over a period of time, and getting some behavioral science involved and cognitive behavioral therapy, tidbits and exercise. And it's really a
Absolutely.
phenomenal long-term program for
Yeah,
health.
if you don't address those lifestyle factors that got us to the problem in the first place,
Yeah.
my friend Sonia Jones, she likes to say, I didn't get that way just because I love pizza,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's so many contributing lifestyle factors,
There are.
mental, emotional, and everything that has driven us there. If we don't address those, we're not going to have that long-term success.
You bet.
So we've got the tools to help our people with that long term now, which is fantastic. And sarcastically, I wanted to say in the beginning of this, what do you mean there's 3 phases, Doc? I thought there was only one. I thought it was all about the weight loss, and then I'm done and out of there, right?
John, you are doing yourself, and your pay. You know this, and I know you talk to your patients about this. But if you just do the weight loss phase, we don't even start you, because it's not about that. It's not about vanity. It's about your health, and we've got to move you into phase 2 so that you really get the big idea of where you can live for the rest of
Yeah.
your life.
Yeah.
Right?
And I tell my people now, quite frankly, phase 2 is the most fun part of the entire deal.
It is. It is.
The way that we do it, and one of the things, number one, you get new foods right away.
Yeah.
You get to eat some fun new foods
Yeah.
right away. We get to
Yeah.
see how they affect your body. I
Yeah.
I want them at the end of phase 2 to be the master of their own metabolism.
There you go.
I want them to understand how every food that they eat, how that impacts their body. Like I said, on a symptomatic level,
Yeah.
and or as we're looking at their body composition, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's fascinating and so much fun.
It is.
All right. So
So, yeah.
I also we talk about a 3 phase kind of a deal. I love this when Deirdre introduced this, I believe.
Yes.
Um, and when this came out, I was already preaching this, but I hadn't put it into this context. So it really gave me an amazing context to be able to speak to my clients.
Right.
Phase 0, and this is where most of us, and especially my before picture, when that guy entered the program, I
Mhm.
was in phase 0. Please take us
Yeah.
through these slides.
Sure. This is brilliant. I mean, Deirdre Pizzafrata was our she was the director of protocol. She does sit on the medical board, but now she's working
Yep.
in the childhood obesity space. And
Yeah.
this is brilliant in that a patient comes to us, they're insulin resistant. They have insulin resistance. They don't know it, but they have it.
Yeah.
And so they've been consuming a high carbohydrate, high fat, processed food diet that bumps up the hormone insulin. One hormone we haven't talked about yet is glucagon. So
Who knew
remember,
about glucagon? It's right.
you,
It's
you
the
love
unsung
glucagon.
hero. It's
You
the
bet.
unsung hero.
You
Go ahead.
bet.
Sorry.
No, you bet. So those two hormones are produced in the pancreas, and insulin is the energy storing hormone, and glucagon is the energy utilizing hormone. So what we really want to happen is we want that seesaw to tip the other way, because when that person has a high insulin to glucagon ratio, they're storing, they're intaking food, and their nutrition is being utilized for energy, but then the rest of it's being stored.
And
If we go
Doc,
to
for me,
phase,
let me just stop you real quick,
yeah, yeah,
okay? Because this concept I feel is so super important for people to understand. And when I say at the beginning of the show that I had given up, I did
yes,
not think that there was a solution, because I never had a weight issue before. I could always drop 10 pounds at the drop of a hat by eating
mhm,
less and exercising more, because I was metabolically flexible before. My body could burn fat when I exercised, and I could lose weight.
Hmm.
This concept right here, phase zero, metabolic inflexibility, which
Yes.
comes to the underlying insulin resistance. Not only does insulin store excess carbohydrates as fat, but again, the biggest thing Dolores Zimbato taught me during her initial workshops in my office was that insulin puts a lock on that fat tank and won't let you tap into and burn fat for fuel. So
Hmm.
when we talk about metabolic inflexibility, that means you're stuck burning carbs. And I don't care if you joined Orange Theory, if you go to Planet Fitness,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
care if you're doing spin class or boot camp, you're burning carbs. It's carbs in
Right.
and carbs out.
Right.
And that's why exercise stopped working for me. That's why people get so frustrated because they
Hmm.
can't lose the fat
Yep.
that they want to
Yep.
by exercising.
Right.
It's because of the state of metabolic flexibility inside. That's why this concept I feel like is so super important.
And you bring that up. A good point you just brought up was that, people will do a resolution to lose weight and they'll go to
Yeah.
the gym, and usually January is our big month. You would think that January is a big dietary intervention weight loss month, but it's actually
It's
the rest.
not.
No, it's February, March, because
Right.
they've given up at the gym and putting their hands up and saying, "All right, I got to do something else," and then they come to us.
So
And so
that's where
what
we
do
say right now, how's
yeah, and
that
what do
working
we
for you?
do? What do we do with them? So we want them to lose weight, and they do too. So we put them in a deliberate imbalance. We
Yep.
actually reverse where they were before. We make
You
glucagon the
have to.
dominant hormone, so that IG ratio, insulin to glucagon ratio, is lower. And now we're going through this nutritional ketogenic, if you will, fat burning. Ketosis just means fat burning. So we
Yeah,
are
that's all
actually
it
going
means.
into burning of our fat by stimulating glucagon, reducing the carbohydrates. So insulin is recessive, and we're supplying adequate protein. So we're feeding the lean mass, giving good, healthy fats. So we're keeping the body healthy, all those supplements. And now we're getting that patient to burn their own fat for energy. And that's what we want. That's phase one. That's how we are successful at weight loss. Most people lose a decent amount in the first week because of something called diuresis, where their glycogen, which is storing water in their muscles and storing energy in their muscle, that gets released first. And then thereafter, some of the studies that were done show that women, on average, week in, week out, 2.5 pounds a week, men 3.5 pounds a week. Of course, there's some variation if there's menstruation going on or what have you. But,
Yep.
we know that that's where we can predict, is everything going okay with the diet if you're losing that type of weight loss. So phase one, we remain in phase one until we've reached an achievement of, we're trying to restore that metabolic flexibility, but we're still inflexible because we've created this imbalance. But we
Yep.
want to achieve that weight loss goal. And in
Yep.
many people, my first suggestion, I know you suggest this too, John, is 10%. Let's start there and make that an accessible goal. Get success in. If I need to lose, if I'm 300 plus pounds and I need to lose 100, for me to go think I got 100 pounds to go through, if you tell me it's 10% and it's 30 pounds, I'm going to say I can do that standing on my head. So that's why we start with 10%. Why do we also start there, John? As you well know, that's where the health outcomes start to come
Yep.
in for the patient. They start getting healthier there. And we see changes in their metabolic profile. We see changes in their comorbidities.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, too, again, glucagon, when we're looking, I love this slide, when we're looking
Right.
at this imbalance that we've deliberately now created in the opposite direction, the first thing glucagon does when it gets released in your bloodstream is unlock that fat tank, right?
Right. Right.
Open fat storage. We've been preparing for this for so long. Let's do that.
You
And just
bet.
like you talked about, the diuresis that happens, that's why everybody and their brother and sister loses weight on that first week. And then that's why the ideal protein patients settle into that 2.5 to 3.5 pounds a week average that we see so consistently, so repeatably, so measurably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So then now,
Yeah. Now
this
this
is
is
why
where,
phase two is so much
yeah,
fun and so important.
this is where we're restoring metabolic flexibility. So remember, when phase zero, insulin was high, the IG ratio was high, insulin to glucagon, that ratio is high. We put them in balance, so we make insulin go low and glucagon high, so the IG ratio is low. And now we're trying to get a balance. This is what we want when we start developing your macro code. At the end of phase one, we start with your macro targets. And that will give you, we have a macro calculator that is proprietary to us. So your patient gets, you put the data of the patient, their gender and their weight into the macro calculator, and it comes out. And for you and me, John, it said, okay, John and Dennis, you need 6.5 grams of protein. John, you need 5 to 7, servings. You need
Yep.
5 to 7 servings of fat, John. Dennis, you need 6 to 8. And then let's start at a base level for us. Your base level is lower, right? So maybe we start patients at 20, let's say, or 40, or those type 1 diabetics who are doing the alternative plan, maybe 75. But we start them at a different level, and every week we retitrate in back another good foundational complex carbohydrate that gives them another extra 5 grams weekly, and until we come to a point where this starts to balance itself. And when it goes out of balance, John, the insulin will rise. And what will happen in this phase? You'll get hungry. You may put on a couple pounds. Besides the initial glycogen load, you get a glycogen load back in your muscles. And I might have said glucagon before, but I meant glycogen load in your muscles.
Nope.
As that comes back, we go beyond that. As we're balancing this seesaw, we're starting to develop metabolic flexibility. And we start with your targets and we titrate up. If we get hunger or craving foods and we gain some weight, we know we've got to bring you back down. Yep. So you may have gone up to 45 and realized, hey, this is too high, and put you back down to 55 or 35, and the same dose with any patient. So we find out where you have a balance of your insulin and your glucagon. So now you're metabolically flexible. You're insulin sensitive now. So your body can accept its nutrition and do what it has to do.
And the way I like to describe it as well, it's kind of like, you're a hybrid. We were built to be a hybrid car, right? Yes. And our body was meant to decide which fuel was most efficient for what activity we're actually doing.
Right.
And so, again, for me, you and I are sitting here basically doing a Zoom call, basically doing a podcast, and neither one of our bodies should be burning sugar to get through this call. Right? I mean, we should be burning fat for all our activities of daily living as our primary fuel because they're low level, right? They're low intensity. Right. And then, man, I'm telling you, if we go to boot camp, if we go to spin class, and we start pumping iron, playing soccer, you know what? Our body at some point with that intensity level is going to shift, and it's supposed to burn carbohydrates. That's what it's supposed to be for.
Right.
Nobody should be burning sugar on the Zoom call.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so this metabolic flexibility means your body can go back and forth depending on what's going on. It's allowed to make its own decisions.
And I want to say that I really strongly suggest, phase 2, that stabilization phase, which I'm telling everybody here and now, that's the holy grail of this whole thing. It's the holy grail of weight loss. And I want to say that do the full 8 weeks, and you can go anywhere from 2 to 8. But I strongly recommend, and I think you do to your patients, strongly recommend staying with it for 8 weeks, because you'll learn a lot about food. And then when we go to phase 3, it becomes easy. You can live in this phase of this metabolic flexibility. You'll know what your plate should look like when you eat every meal. You'll know what to shop for at the grocery store. And we help you live in this great state of health where you can go through metabolic flexibility and stage 3, beyond stabilization into stage 3, which is your maintenance phase, and that's what we want. We want that you to be able to live in maintenance.
What I love
And
about it and what you just said is it's so much more simplistic. You are not pumping every gram of everything that you're eating into a macro calculator. And I don't need you to be an accountant. I
right.
need you to be able to walk up to a buffet, pull out a plate, and look at the food on that buffet and say, all right, I'm going to get 2 servings of protein from the chicken breast I just pulled up. I'm
Hmm.
going to put some vegetables in there. I'm going to put some fat. I've got, 2 or 3 servings of fat that I'm putting on my plate. And you know what? Yeah, there's a little bit that's got carbs in
Right.
it. I know from
Right.
the research I've done, maybe 10 or 12. I'm going to throw that in there.
Right.
But you don't have to pull out, how many grams is in
Yeah.
that? And how many,
Yeah.
what's in that? I've got to
Yeah.
do my calculator. I'm in phase 2 or 3.
Yeah.
That's
And
just
that's,
not it.
yeah. And that's what phase two does for you. It really establishes, I really know how to eat now. And when we move on to the next slide, which is phase three, maintenance, we're in there and we're just living in that space. Now, you may gain in phase three. There may be holidays or cruises
Yep.
or what
Yep.
have you. And so the really cool thing that we do is we may do a reboot, right? We go
Yep.
to phase one for a week or so just to reestablish normal again for you, get you
Yep.
back insulin sensitive again, and get you flexible again. Because I go on vacation or I have, Christmas time for me typically is, okay, no holds barred, so to speak. And my IG ratio may change. My insulin to
Yes.
glucagon ratio is obviously going to be higher. It's more sedentary because of the weather outside. So, you know, I like to do a little tune up in the beginning of the year. And this year I actually started before the new year, but it was basically a week on phase one. And then now again, living in maintenance because phase two
Yeah.
is such a great educator. It's the great educator. And
Absolutely.
it gets you your code and you can live with that code for life.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like you said, yes, you want to be in a situation where you're merely tuning yourself up.
Yeah.
January is the perfect time after the holiday season. And then after you've had that week vacation in the middle of the summer or whatever's going on
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, 9 out of 10 of my patients come in and they just say, Doc, I just want to feel good again.
Yeah.
And it's more about, God, I'm feeling kind of toxic because of what I have been indulging in that I don't have in my normal daily life. I
Right.
want to detoxify, clean that stuff out. You'll see the scale shift a little bit, but and for me, like I say too, it's symptomatic almost even before it's on the scale. My digestive stuff goes haywire, aches and
Yeah.
pains.
Yeah.
It's amazing how if I run over and I do too many extra carbs, how my inflammatory response comes back.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's once you felt that much pain and inflammation and it goes away, which you
Hmm.
never thought would ever
Hmm.
go away, and it starts to creep back in there, you're like, oh, we're not doing this again,
Right.
right? I
Yeah,
know what to
absolutely.
do. I
Yeah.
know what to do. Clean out those. Let's clean up that metabolism. Let's get back to metabolically flexible, and let's shut down that inflammatory response again.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is, basically the benefits of 5 to 10%. I like to say 10% because the studies show now that 10% will actually help with NAFLD, your symptoms of fatty liver, and all these other symptoms. So I would always suggest to a patient, let's try 10% first. The number's more like 7 to 10%, so five's a
Yep.
little light, but
Mm-hmm.
10% total body weight loss will get you a better health outcome. Like I said in the beginning of the show, for me, it was 70 points down in total cholesterol, 2 inches on my waist, and all of
Yeah.
these things: blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, energy, physical mobility, mood, self-confidence, all changes because you're changing your hormonal physiology. And when you
Yes.
do, all of those have an interrelationship. They all
Yes.
affect each other. So it's a cascading effect. They all are
Yes.
the sea of chemistry that makes you you. And if you can correct that, you can correct a lot of other things. That brings me to the point for the OBGYN. I was just talking to a doctor on our board, Vicky Sherman, and it's been great for PCOS utilizing our protocol. And basically, what are we doing? We're correcting the hormonal issue, and that corrects the pregnancy, non-pregnancy issue, the PCOS issue, etc. So
Yeah.
it's quite fascinating what changing your, I'll go back to this: food as medicine, food is medicine, and weight loss is healthcare. It really is. It really is.
Yeah.
And again, we don't just say that. That's our motto at Ideal Protein, but physicians and research is pointing more and more to that all the time.
Yeah, no, it is that hormonal soup. Again, I point to the fact that the human body is extremely complex, but it's exquisitely simplistic when you start to understand it. Last show was this is like the science show, right? The last show was the feel good show of the entire year, when I interviewed Jill Bailey. Jill Bailey, back in episode 30, talked to us about how she went to an Ideal Protein OBGYN clinic in Indianapolis area, and she had PCOS, but none of her other previous doctors could give her any ideas, number one, on how to lose weight, and or hope for her future, that she was desperate to start a family.
That was probably I'm just going to interject. That's probably Dr. Sherman's clinic, I bet. Yeah. Actually, Women's Health. Yeah.
Exactly. Axial Women's Health.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr.
100%.
Sherman. That's who I was just talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and Jill's story brings it all home. So both episode 30 and episode 38, where she introduces, she turned up pregnant by surprise. She was in phase 1. She was actually at 100 pounds lost. And she turned up pregnant by surprise, and after being told that she'd have to endure all kinds of fertility treatment and all kinds of other things from other OBGYN clinics. So yeah, there's a real world example case study of what you just said.
It's pretty remarkable. It really is.
So again, this brings up what I see as your current top of your list of mission statements. You've got an incredible mission statement that you shared with me, but I think right now this spearheads everything that you do. Right. The concept of positioning the Ideal Protein protocol where it belongs in healthcare.
Right. If there was one thing I could do, is I would like to make our transition into healthcare offices, big networks, orthopedic centers and hospitals. I would like to make that as easy as possible, and to get more physicians on board with doing a dietary intervention. We know that, surgery and these new medications, semaglutide and all of those meds that are coming out, they will do the job of weight loss, but you need a phased protocol that actually not just works on weight loss, but stabilizes that weight loss and maintains that weight loss. And that's what Ideal Protein can do. And again, it's research backed. We've got a bunch of published peer-reviewed published studies recently published. And we are a medically supervised protocol, a healthcare provider supervised protocol that does the trick for patients. I mean, some of these initial studies that were done some time ago, at Avera Cancer Institute, those post menopausal breast cancer patients, they had great results, not only just in weight loss, but they would their C-reactive protein, and a pro-inflammatory marker, dropped significantly by 40%. Yeah. That's significant. Yeah. In some of these other studies, the Aspirus study, the middle study there, that study was done initially. They saw great changes in lipidology. The lipid measures were and cardiovascular risk measures were improved. So metabolic measures were improved. But long term, over 3 years, there was stabilization for those patients that went on the protocol. And not only that, there was a significant healthcare savings. That their large, I think it's about 8 hospital group, what they realized after their staff went on the protocol, they realized about $917 in healthcare savings per employee per year.
Per employee.
Yeah. So it's quite substantial, so corporations could take a look at us. Hospital groups should take a look at us. Physicians who have been putting their hand up against dietary intervention. I really, really, say, just take a look at what we have to offer, the science, the turnkey nature of our protocol, who we assign, 2 consultants to your practice. We also, if you don't want to bring in your practice, we work, in collaboration with local ideal protein clinics.
Yeah.
So, for example, I know you're in my clinic, we both have collaborative relationships with physicians whom we can just supply them with a QR code that their patient can look at to get into one of our healthcare talks.
Yeah.
This NASH study, which I think I mentioned before, quite phenomenal changes at North Shore University. There's a couple of doctors, Dr. Davidson and Dr. Fimmel on our board. They, on our medical advisory board, they did this up at North Shore University in Chicago, and again saw changes in the enzymes, liver enzymes, when they did the ideal protein protocol, but also the FIB4 scores were improved too. So, and there's more. There's going to be,
and that's huge, right?
yeah,
Again, as we're trying to, as people are first understanding non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and/or NASH, understanding. I shared with you a case study that I have in my office where her scan went from just a horrible score. A physical scan score was horrible. Her doctor's mind was blown because her after score was so low that the report basically said, no signs of fibrosis.
That's awesome.
And for something to have that dramatic of an effect, and right now, as I believe, because this is like one of the thing I'm seeing on LinkedIn on my feeds a lot, there's really no standardized treatments for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So I would think that people would be open to trying all kinds of things, much less a natural, basic approach.
Right.
Starting with nutrition.
First, do no harm.
Yeah, right. Again, I understand medical intervention. I understand drugs and surgery are necessary. I had a patient that told me, Doc, if I didn't have gastric bypass, it saved my life. My blood pressure was through the roof. It was not responding to any medications. If I didn't do that initial surgery, then I would have died.
Yeah,
right.
I totally agree. Yeah.
However, she put on 80 pounds after the surgery and was well on her way. And she said, yeah, my surgeon says that long term, there's a 10% long-term weight management after surgery. Yeah. So that's why she came to us, and that's why she uses us she got that weight off, and she uses us so dramatically for weight maintenance.
It's great.
So dramatically. Hey, we're going to finish this up. We've got to wrap this up, Doc.
Sure.
We've got two more studies that I want you to go through here at the end, because they just came out in the past 6-8 months.
Yeah.
I know as a company, we were super excited about it. If you could speak to the Tulane University study.
Sure. That was done by Dr. Linda Bazzano down at Tulane University, and it was utilizing ideal protein. It was basically a test of ideal protein, seeing how ideal protein did against the standard dietary intervention today, as I mentioned before. And I think the American Heart Association uses a low-calorie, low-fat diet. So we went up against the low-calorie, low-fat diet, and our diet had some significant findings that showed that we improved, statistically significant weight, waist circumference, BMI, triglycerides, and total cholesterol. So, the ideal protein system resulted in a statistically significant greater weight loss among men and women with obesity and additional risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So, that was published in Obesity Science and Practice in September of last year. And it was a big study. And, John, I just want to say, that could have come out bad for us. We took a chance. We said, okay, let's see how we do against this. And we did well. But she would have had to publish the results as they came out.
Yeah, sure.
But thankfully, we came out smelling like roses. And then
that's what the peer-reviewed process is all about. And that's what science is actually all about, right? Test a hypothesis and then see. Don't come in with results or what you think the results are going to be.
Right.
Although if you were any ideal protein clinician, you would say, oh, this is going to be good. right?
Right. Right.
Predictable, repeatable, and measurable. And I will tell you, I've never seen any treatment for anything in all of my 25 years of practice that is more predictable, repeatable, and measurable. Just haven't
Yeah.
seen it.
Yeah. Well, physiology is physiology, right?
Right,
If you took your keys up here and let them drop, they would drop every time, right? So
right.
there it is.
Yep.
So this study was done at the University of led by the University of British Columbia. It was a 12-week study, and basically the objective was to see if um, treatment using a carb-restricted diet, and just so happened that ideal protein was that carb-restricted diet.
Yep.
Pharmacists in Canada can prescribe and prescribe in some cases. So they were seeing if it was reasonable for type 2 diabetics on medication for a pharmacist to be able have the ability to deprescribe, right? So research does show that type 2 diabetes can be reversed, can be put into remission. And what happened was they used a treatment as usual, which was basically information about diet and their medications for those type 2 diabetic group. And then they used the therapeutic carb restricted group. And as those two groups went through the protocol, there was about 36% of the population utilizing the carb restricted, which was ideal protein, was the diet they utilized. 36% were taken off of their medication. So quite a significant study that showed that reducing glucose, lowering medications is possible. And again, another study there are other studies out there that do show that dietary intervention does have an impact on
Absolutely.
insulin-dependent type 2 diabetics.
Well, again, we talked about earlier, you and I, a dietary problem, right? A dietarily based disease requires a dietary intervention as
Yes.
some
Yeah.
part of any kind of physician's treatment regimen. Again, fascinating in Canada how they do. There's a separate second degree you can get as a pharmacist that will give you the ability to then deprescribe medications as patients get healthier. Melissa Hozak and PharmaSave, and she was on episode 7 for me. We talked a lot about that, and that's why in Canada you'll see ideal protein in a lot of pharmacies. It's huge up there.
Yeah, it is. And like you said, food created this problem. We can use food to fix the problem. And that's where food actually becomes, weight loss becomes healthcare and food becomes medicine to us.
Yeah,
I mean, I use that term
absolutely.
loosely, but yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's the approach, right? It's the
Yeah,
thought process behind it all. So yeah, let's bring this in for a landing, Dennis. We've been flying all over the place.
I know.
I let us go on. I let us go on longer than I've been trying to, but I'm not going to stop anybody who's got such amazing information. But I kind of feel like we need to enroll everybody in Ideal Protein Nation,
Right.
actually in the mission and vision.
Yeah.
This has been shared to us, corporately, but it's something that we want to share with everybody, and we need for them to help us out with this mission, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we want to lead the way to end obesity through metabolic transformation. We want to change people's health. We don't want this to be a weight loss thing. So whenever I use ideal protein, I talk about a weight management system
Yep.
because that's what we are.
Yep.
But yes, our first phase is weight loss, but we want to transform your health, and we want to empower you to achieve weight loss so that you can live a healthier life. And,
Absolutely.
and not only that, John, I really would like to, help healthcare providers see the value of what this intervention, this dietary intervention called ideal protein can do for their patients, for
Yeah.
their practice, for their system. I really believe it needs to get out there more. There's so much we have to do in this space. That's why I say it's a calling for me. It's captured me.
Yep.
There's the obesity awareness. There's changing the way we do things in schools, in healthcare, in insurance, and the payers, et cetera, et cetera. So we really need to do our job to help people be healthy. And I appreciate a podcast like this, John, and the work that you do in this space is just phenomenal. It really is. And I applaud you, and I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And I'm sure Ideal Protein Nation does also.
Thank you, Dennis. I really appreciate that. Again, we are actually in the process, like I said, of shifting the focus of my clinic. I've recently rebranded from Barnes Chiropractic to Reset Wellness because this is my final battlefield. This is my calling. This is the fight that I am willing to give the rest of my life to. I don't think that there's anything more important than the battle against the obesity and metabolic syndrome epidemic in the United States and in the world. And I don't think that there is a more powerful or potent weapon than the Ideal Protein Protocol. And that's what gave birth to this podcast. And that's why we're episode 39. And I get Dr. Dennis Barley on my show, and we're saying these things, and we're trying to enroll as many people in this battle as we can, because, like you said, it doesn't take a village; it takes an army.
Yeah,
we really need to enlist as many people on every level, whether you're a dieter or client, whether you are a coach, whether you are a clinic owner, and or whether you are a physician in practice. It's going to take all of us to make a dent, right?
Very much so. Yeah, I appreciate it. Appreciate everything, John. Thanks again.
All right, Dennis. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. Hang out backstage real quick. I want to talk after the show.
Will do.
But, thank you for everything that you do. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks here in the Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah.
If we get to do our continuing ed weekend and get back to that stuff, I can't wait to reconnect.
Great. Looking forward to it.
All right, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was absolutely phenomenal. I hope that you made it. If you didn't make it through in the first listen, I hope that you take the time to make it all the way this far. We seem to have saved a lot of the best of the stuff for last. But thank you. I'm going to ask you again, as we are enlisting you in the mission and vision, if you heard something here that you feel like your doctor, your physician needs to hear, try to pass this show on to them. We need to make as many healthcare practitioners aware of the Ideal Protein program as possible, and you can help us with that mission. So, again, as always, I ask you, like, subscribe, pass us on. If you haven't listened to a lot of the other episodes, go back and listen to them. We've got some incredible stories of life possible. And so until 2 weeks from now, I hope to have another amazing episode for you. I've got a few lined up, and it's going to be fun to figure out which one comes next. So until then, keep reaching for your life possible.